Good afternoon, everybody. I am happy to be here. If this was a football game, I would be spiking the ball and doing my end zone dance. That is how big a day it was for Chicagoans and Southside Chicagoans with respect to the extension of the Red Line. It's been a long time coming, but change is going to come. Change is going to come in allowing people to come from way out at 130th and in the middle of nowhere all the way downtown, from all Gale Gardens all throughout downtown, to be able to connect to jobs and opportunity. It's always said that everybody talks about crime in Chicago. One of the best deterrents of crime is having a job. And with this increased transportation, will allow people to get to and from work, to have better choices and with respect to transportation and jobs, etc. I'm also happy and want to spike the ball because I got rid of a colleague that had started with me for 20 years ago and got a new, more improved version in Ellen Bell Abarca. And so we are happy, and I've told her and warned her, be careful what you ask for because you just might get it. And so without further ado, our illustrious mayor, Mayor Lori Lightfoot.
Thank you. So good afternoon, everybody. Big day for the city of Chicago. Big news on the major infrastructure front, which we'll talk a little bit more about. Major news for economic development as our casino moves closer to reality. And a great day for our city as we welcome new aldermanic leadership. You heard from Alderman Brookins. You'll also hear from CTA President Dorval Carter. You'll hear from Andrea Kluger of the CFL. And I just want to say personally, thank you, Andrea. Thank you for all that you did on a number of different matters that were before the City Council today. We rely upon and depend upon your stalwart leadership, and it makes a huge difference in our city, and you are really contributing in a significant way. So thank you. Jalen McClinton. I'm not sure which title I'm giving you today, but I know you're going to talk about the Red Line and as a lifelong resident of Roseland. I also want to thank our 12th Ward Selection Committee, President of the Wolcott Block Club, Donna Hubble, and Pam Walsh from the Chicagoland Brokers, who did the hard work, made the recommendations, and brought us our new alderman. So first and foremost, City Council took a major step forward in making our city a more equitable and modernized place to live. With the approval of the new transit TIF district, we have finally the funds to leverage and begin the Red Line extension project. This is 50 years in the making. You heard when we talked about this a month or so ago that one of the speakers who was here remembers Richard J. Daley making a promise and commitment that the Red Line would be extended to the far south side. We are now in a position to not only start the work that needs to be done, but to talk to the federal government and say, your turn to ante up. And we have the resources now because of the historic work being done by the Biden-Harris administration, and in particular led by Secretary Buttigieg of the Department of Transportation. So we are extraordinarily excited today about being able to take this next step forward. And let me just remind you of a couple details. This project will add 5.6 miles to the Red Line and create 4 new fully accessible stations at 103rd Street, 111th Street, Michigan Avenue near 116th Street, and 130th Street near the Alt-Geld Gardens Public Housing Complex. Someone said it today, I think it was Alderman Beal. These communities have been disconnected. With the extension of the Red Line, they will be connected. They will be able to move smoothly from one end of the city to the other. This is a big deal for the residents of the South Side, but importantly, a big deal for our city. And this project will bring a rail line to the far South Side, which until now is the only part of our city that doesn't have any kind of rail service. So this is an important step forward. This opens up our city and all of its opportunities for jobs, education, and commerce to the far south side, because we're not just going to have train stops extending to 130th Street. We're going to build economic development opportunities around each of these stops to bring amenities to the communities that will be served by this Red Line extension. In return, this project will serve as a catalyst for other economic development on the far south side, as more residents and visitors will be able to visit these neighborhoods more easily, too. We also hope that the extension will bolster our previous and ongoing investments that we make through initiatives like Invest Southwest. All in, the Red Line Extension project represents one of the most critical investments in CTA's history and will undoubtedly be a transformative project for the far south side communities that will benefit from these 4 stops. This will strengthen the CTA system and benefit our entire city by driving economic prosperity, and that can't be overstated how monumental this moment is. The Red Line Extension project isn't a new idea, as we all know, but we dream big, and I'm happy to say we are going to make this happen. 5 decades in the making. Now, I'm deeply humbled, obviously, to be the mayor who is finally going to be able to get this project over the finish line, as this project perfectly aligns with the priorities that we set from day one regarding equity and inclusion in our city. I've got to thank President Carter. I know that this is a long-time dream for you. I want to thank everybody at the CTA. I want to thank our state partners, and of course I want to thank our federal partners, notably our federal delegation, and again, Secretary Buttigieg of the Department of Transportation, and President Biden and Vice President Harris for making this moment possible. Today is a day of celebration, not just for the Red Line, but also because we have selected a new alderman for the 12th Ward. It's a privilege to introduce you all to Annabelle Abarca, the new alderwoman from the McKinley Park, Brighton Park, and Little Village community. Annabelle is a lifelong Chicagoan and current resident of the McKinley Park neighborhood. Together, her career path and lived experiences make her perfectly qualified to understand the needs of her community members and to lead the 12th Ward into a bright future. And she had a head start by being a chief of staff to the outgoing alderman, so she knows how to get things done in City Hall and in the neighborhood. She's got a passion for helping people which began at a young age when she helped her immigrant parents navigate city services and translate legal documents. This sparked her interest in the legal field, and she's proudly an attorney. And as an attorney, she's honed and strengthened her skills in leadership, negotiating, and more, while supporting the business community and prioritizing pro bono work for people who cannot afford legal services. Annabelle is also involved in many community organizations and nonprofits that support diverse communities and community development. I have every confidence that Annabelle's commitment and capability will serve each and every one of the 12th Ward residents well. Let me invite her up, and then we'll move on to other important issues that we want to talk with and share with you about. Annabelle. You can clap for her.
Thank you so much, Mayor Lightfoot. I just, again, want to iterate what I said earlier, which is that it is a great privilege and an honor. As Mayor Lightfoot said, I am born and raised here in Chicago, and so as a little girl, I was the only person in my family who could speak English for a while, and my first introduction to City Hall was helping my parents get a permit for their business at the time. And so it's that has continued on in my career throughout college and as an attorney, and I take those lessons with me as I head into, as I'm now the alderman of the 12th Ward. Being chief of staff was a great experience. There is no better training for it. I don't normally wear heels specifically for that because you're doing a lot of walking, a lot of door knocking, and being very hands-on with residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, President Dorval Carter of the Chicago Transit Authority.
Oh my goodness. Thank you. Today is a historic day for the far south side of the city. It's a historic day for the Red Line, and it's a historic day for the city as a whole. Today's City Council approval of a TIF to support the Red Line extension means that we can take the final steps to turn the decades-long dream into reality and to reverse decades of inequality. For 50 years, the far south side has been the only part of the city without rail transit extending to the city limits. Those residents have had to endure longer commutes, lack of investment, and fewer opportunities. Now, that's about to change. With approval of this TIF, I can now secure $2 billion in federal funding to support this project. The federal infrastructure bill signed last year was intended exactly for projects like this one, projects that will bring change to lives and communities for the better, and bring long-awaited opportunity and access to communities that absolutely deserve it. Be assured that I will be working extremely hard to secure these additional funds and to bring them back to Chicago, just as I did with the federal funding that was supporting the Red and Purple Modernization Project on the north part of the city. And I'll continue to pursue potential funding sources from other state and local areas. From day one of her tenure, Mayor Lightfoot has been my biggest supporter for this project, which, as she indicated, directly aligns with her citywide efforts to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. Once again, thank you, Mayor, for all of your work and all of your support to make this transformational project happen. I also want to thank the members of the City Council who supported the funding for this project. This body recognized that investment in transit benefits will benefit the entire city, and that extending the Red Line will address long-standing injustice and achieve a significant noble goal: fairness. I want to thank our great partners at the Department of Planning and Development, whose collaboration and guidance reflected the fact that this is not so much about this is more than about transit. Sorry, I'm kind of emotional today. I've been trying to keep it together, but I told myself I wasn't going to break down on this up here today. And lastly, I want to thank my CTA staff. They have worked tirelessly over the years to make this project happen. And for the past 7 years, they have been dedicated to getting us to this day. Though their commitment to engaging with and being responsive to community and council members, we would not be having this moment that we're experiencing today. And I am forever grateful for their ongoing support of CTA. Throughout the process, I've had long and productive conversations with City Council members about the best ways to ensure that this project creates numerous opportunities for economic development, for job and contracting opportunities, and for community involvement. The Council has my commitment that I will continue those important conversations and make that a reality, just like we have done on the Red Purple Modernization Project. 50 years ago, residents on the far south side first began talking about extending what was known as the Dan Ryan Line. A half century later, we should all be honored to be in a position to help turn the far south side's hopes and dreams into a long-awaited reality. Chicago faces some elemental questions. Who are we as a city? What do we value? What do we want to achieve? How do we get there? The Red Line extension certainly helps answer those questions definitively once and for all, and I am grateful to be a part of this particular opportunity. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Doyle.
Thank you.
All right, next up, Andrea Kluger.
Good afternoon. My name is Andrea Kluger. I'm Deputy Chief of Staff at the Chicago Federation of Labor. The CFL represents approximately 300 unions who in turn represent 500,000 working people across Chicago and Cook County. The CFL stands in solidarity with all workers fighting for their families across the city, which is why we've strongly supported securing the Red Line Extension TIF, which will be critical to ensuring this project becomes a reality. I'd first like to thank the mayor and the city council for moving this project forward and securing the funding for the Red Line extension. This TIF funding was necessary to leverage what could be an additional $2 billion in federal funding. We are excited about this project for many reasons. First and foremost, this project will create good paying jobs and employment opportunities for all communities. I'm not just talking about the building of the Red Line extension, which will create 6,000 good union construction jobs. We're also talking about the 30,000 total jobs that will be created by the new development and businesses around the Red Line extension and the brand new transit stations on the far south side. This project will connect the far south side community with the rest of the city, and that opens up access to jobs, education, and training opportunities. Think of the new doors that will open for someone who doesn't have to take so much time transferring to multiple buses and trains just to get to work every day. The new opportunities downtown, in Pilsen, Lincoln Park, Rogers Park, and beyond. And for those hardworking residents in Pullman, Roseland, Calumet Park, less time spent traveling to work means family can spend more time together and planning for everything else important in life. Frequent rail service will reduce commute times and provide sustainable transportation that will help contribute to improved air quality, reduction of emissions, and energy savings. And that is a benefit to all Chicagoans. Again, we're excited about this project because of the great jobs it will provide and the great opportunities it will create for the far south side community. Thank you again to the mayor and the city council for moving this forward. And next we have Jalen McClinton.
Thank you, Andrea, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jalen McClinton, a lifelong Chicagoan, a proud 29-year resident of the Roseland neighborhood. I use he, him pronouns for the reporters, and I'm situated at the podium with greenish-colored clothing for those that are visually impaired. The idea of a rail line extension from 95th Street to the 130th Street was first proposed in 1959, 63 years ago. For upwards of 6 decades, Black Chicagoans have waited and waited and waited some more for a promise of jobs and economic development that seemed like it was never going to happen, which is often the case in our community, broken promises that never crystallize. As a young person traversing Chicago, I recall vividly my grandmother Bertha traveling to the North Shore and the North Side to clean the homes of wealthy white families as a homemaker, while my mother Cassandra worked in corporate America in the Loop by day and as a nail technician at night, just to make sure our working class household had the basic necessities to survive. Our saving grace was always the Chicago Transit Authority, and more specifically, the Red Line. I often reflect about how if the rail line was fully extended in 1969 when it opened, whether my mother or grandmother would have had to travel upwards of an hour plus to reach those opportunities. I imagine their experience would have been different, less cumbersome. My region of Chicago and places like Altgeld Gardens, Pullman, Roseland, Rosemore, Washington Heights, and West Pullman have been shut out of their fair shot at opportunity too many times to count on one hand. While I know firsthand that education truly is the great equalizer, access to affordable, quality, reliable, and timely transportation is not that far behind. Transportation, particularly rail service, has been a major driver in my own personal life as well, whether it was my commute to school at St. Sabina Academy, Curie Metropolitan High School, and more recently at the Chicago Kent College of Law, or now as I travel to work as a professional. My fellow Chicagoans, today, we are on the brink of a rail line stop blocks away rather than miles away from my front doorstep on the far south side of Chicago. That's something to celebrate. For a while, I thought this day would never come, as I and so many others have lived the reality of a tale of two cities, the haves versus the have-nots. Although it does not have to and should not be that way, it is. With today's historic vote by Chicago City Council, we are one step closer to ushering in a reality where economic parity, fairness, racial justice, and transit equity are the standard in this great city that I love. However, while this designation of local transit TIF funding, inching towards nearly $1 billion, was a critical step in the process, we still have a ways to go in ensuring that city transit is not just for mobility purposes. but truly centered as a component of working class lives and values that includes a comprehensive approach to affordable housing, environmental justice, job creation, public safety, and other quality of life efforts. In closing, I applaud the work of all the stakeholders involved in this process to date, and it is truly my hope that the Biden-Harris administration, the U.S. Department of Transportation, the Pritzker-Stratton administration, the Illinois General Assembly, and Cook County will do everything in their power to join the city of Chicago in making the rail line extension a reality once and for all. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, happy to take your questions.
Thanks a lot, Mayor. Appreciate it. Members of the media, Jackie and I will bring down the mic. 2 questions for a reporter. We'll start off with Craig.
I can't be trusted to hold the mic.
Give him the mic.
Thank you.
If he tries to run out without it, we'll get him.
Only in time for a 4:30 live shot. So, Mayor, let me first ask just about this Red Line project. I mean, we've talked about how long it's been in the making, but when are people actually going to see something happening? Because they've waited 50 years. How much longer are they going to be waiting?
Well, as you know, this project will go in several stages, and I'll invite President Carter to come up and give the details. But this was an important vote to make sure that we had our own financial skin in the game as required by the U.S. Department of Transportation. If we hadn't passed it today, we would have been looking at years and years longer. So this was timely, it's important, and our hope is then it opens up the next phase of funding. So some of the initial planning and design work has already been done. This will give us the opportunity to accelerate and finish that work. And our hope is then later this coming spring, we'll receive good word from the Department of Transportation that they're bought into the proposal that we put forward to them. And then my hope is construction will start as soon thereafter as possible. President Carter, you want to provide more details?
Sure. I think the mayor was pretty accurate in her summary. What this vote did today is give me the commitment that I need to now get the federal funding. It's my expectation that those conversations will start up at the first of the year. What we are looking to accomplish is to be put into the president's budget for 2024, which will be announced near the end of next year, with the expectation that we will get the funding commitment shortly thereafter. We have already begun the procurement process for the design build of this particular project. That began actually a month or so ago. We plan to award the contracts for that work sometime mid next year, and that will begin the process for moving towards the building of this particular project. The key here has been getting the commitment. The federal government won't consider giving me a dime until I can show that we have skin in the game. And so getting this commitment allows me to now have that conversation. As the mayor pointed out, she's been in contact with the secretary. I've been in contact with a number of other DOT officials. They are all anxiously waiting the opportunity to support a project like this. We are the poster child of what the Biden administration is achieving and trying to achieve with their infrastructure investments. And I am very confident that with the commitments that I have to date, we will be able to bring in the other $2 billion we need to make this project a reality.
So, yeah, thank you. Just quickly off topic, since it's my second and only question. Your campaign has made some hay of the donations that came from Sam Bankman-Fried's money to one of your challengers, Chuy Garcia, but you stood with the company representatives back in the spring when they broke ground in Fulton Market. What is your connection to FTX, and is there some money that you need to be returning?
I have no connection to them, and I didn't take any money. But I think that it's fair game. Some have called Mr. Garcia the front runner. It's fair game for him to answer questions about what his connection was, what was his conversation with the now indicted and alleged fraudster who took investors' money, misused them. I think the public deserves to have answers from him, and it's not acceptable as a congressman, as a candidate for mayor, that he will not answer any questions directly. And you should hold him accountable. If he's the front runner, hold him accountable.
Correct, Pratt, Tribune.
Good afternoon, Mayor.
Good afternoon.
Do you plan on attending future mayoral candidate forums? And I mean, what's your thought and strategy on how many of them are you going to attend, and how do you decide to attend?
Well, first of all, I can't predict the future as to how many there are. When I ran 4 years ago, I think I attended like 60 of them. And certainly, I'm interested in making sure that I'm out there and answering questions in a forum that is fair and open. And I'll get there when we see that. But a lot of community organizations are talking about what their plans are. I think many of them will probably take place in January, and we'll evaluate them individually to see if it makes sense for me to attend.
And then on the, you've worked very hard to get labor support. You've worked with the CFL and Bob Ryder. What was your reaction to not getting an endorsement from them and them staying neutral?
They've been neutral, I think, the last 4 or 5 cycles, so it's not a surprise.
Heather, WTTW.
Hi, Mayor.
Hi there.
A lot of your competitors in the race have released their public safety plans. Will you release a new public safety plan as part of the campaign? And do you see any change in how you address public safety if you're elected to a second term?
We talk about and explain our public safety plan virtually every day. The people that are interested in taking my job obviously have to talk about what they're going to do, what their vision is. Public safety is the #1 issue. But I would say I want to hear, because I don't think all of them have released plans, but I also want to see the people who have associated themselves with defunding the police, what their plan is in a time where the #1 issue on everyone's lips around kitchen tables is public safety, public safety, public safety. This is something we've been extraordinarily transparent about, the highs and the lows. We make adjustments all the time, depending on what the circumstances are. I'm happy to say that we are down 15% in homicides, 20% in shootings, and on the far west side, a community that's been plagued by violence, we're seeing historic drops, 40% and higher. In the 15 communities that we have been focused on for the last 18 months, we're seeing remarkable progress because of the work that we're doing with local stakeholders. So the plan is a plan. It's something we talk about literally every time I step before any microphone. But I want to see what these folks who say they have the cure for public safety, what the truth is about that and how they would go about doing something differently. You know, it's easy to say, oh, let's fire this one, let's fire that one. But that's speaking to me for people who have zero experience in public safety. I've been around these issues as a prosecutor, as a member of the police department, as a criminal defense attorney, as an advocate for police reform and accountability for over 20 years. And I think my body of work speaks for itself.
There is a relatively robust field of candidates who want to be elected to the district councils who will feed into the new community commission. Do you anticipate endorsing any of those candidates or getting involved in those races in any way? And are you concerned that there are will be some vacancies on the south and the west sides?
I have just started looking at the people who put themselves forward. Obviously, we want full participation everywhere, but I don't anticipate that I will be weighing in on those elections. I'll be following them very closely, but I don't anticipate any endorsements.
Any concern about the south and the west side?
Yeah, I am concerned about it. And, you know, we have to look at ways in which we can fill those gaps, because I do want to make sure that every part of the city is fully represented. This is a very important moment. As you know, this was years in the making. We spent a lot of time trying to get the finer points right, and we want to make sure that there's full participation in all areas of the city, particularly in those areas of the city where I think trust is really a concern, legitimacy of policing is really a concern. We need the involvement of residents to sit on these councils.
Taman WGN.
Hi, Mayor.
Hi there.
Speaking of public safety, Chicago news organizations and your administration have had talks about police radio transmissions now being encrypted. Other jurisdictions, including Las Vegas, have allowed local media organizations to listen to police communications in real time. Why won't you?
Well, here's the thing. What we've offered to the media organizations is a slight delay in the transmissions, and they've essentially told us I won't say pound sand, but that's essentially what they've told us. Their way or no way. And where I come from on this issue is this. Having watched that fateful last weekend in May of 2020, when it felt like our city was really coming apart, seeing with my own eyes the challenges that our officers were having, and then learning that the communication challenges were as a result of having unencrypted communications, watching individuals who clearly were tapped into the communications try to avoid apprehension as they were listening, and we were trying to, the police officers were trying to direct in a massive crowd of chaos. It made me want to understand more about what was happening. One individual in particular that I remember had lit a police car on fire. He was trying to spray paint cameras, and as officers in the command post were trying to communicate with people in the field, he was clearly listening because he was changing direction when they were giving direction of which way he was headed. Literally changed his clothing to avoid apprehension. And then what I found out was, on a routine basis, you have individuals in our community blowing whistles, air horns, and doing other things to interrupt and disrupt the communications from the dispatchers to the police officers and so forth. And then finally, some people are even taking it even further and doing things like calling 10-1s, meaning officer down, to send officers on a false mission. All of those things are possible when you don't have encrypted transmissions. So my team has spent a lot of time trying to talk to, explain, and see that we could come to some common ground. And we were told by the media outlets, our way or no way. Well, then I have my primary responsibility as mayor is public safety, public safety, public safety. Radio encryptions are a key tool that we have to use for officer and public safety. And again, my door is open. I am willing to keep and continue the conversation, but the non-negotiables for me are officer and public safety. And I've seen what happens with my own eyes when we don't have encrypted communications.
In the interest of transparency, which of course you campaigned on 3 years ago, what you just cited sounds like issues where the public would be listening in, but what about journalists, serious news? Is there a way for...
It's the same. You can't have one without the other. One of the proposals that the media came and said was, oh, let us have access, but nobody else. How can I fairly say, oh, we're only going to give it to certain media outlets, not all, because that was the proposal, not everybody, but the members of the public have to wait. It's about officer safety. If it's unencrypted and there's access, there's no way to control criminals who are going to also get access, listen in, and adjust their criminal behavior in response to the information that's being communicated by the officers via radio transmission. It doesn't stop the problem that I also identified, which is literally people blowing whistles, air horns, and doing everything else to block the transmissions. And it doesn't stop the problem of people recklessly calling 10-1s and other things to distract officers and send them on what are effectively false missions. And when there's an emergency that's going on, we've got to be able to communicate in a way that we can address the emergency, and particularly if we're trying to apprehend somebody who is committing a crime real time, our officers have to be protected in that situation and have to have the tools that are necessary to do the job to protect the public. So again, I'm more than willing to have the conversation. Our team has had that conversation, but it cannot be as some of the folks in the media said, our way or no way. This isn't about transparency. We've offered a delayed transmission. Everything will be out in the public, but it is about making sure that our officers and the public are protected. That is my solemn obligation as mayor, and I cannot compromise that. Again, I'm not making up some hypothetical circumstance. I saw this unfolding real time, and this was hopefully a once-in-a-lifetime experience, because it was horrific to watch and see how individuals in our community, whether they were from here or someplace else, took advantage of the unencrypted transmissions to wreak havoc, to overturn buses, to light vehicles on fire, to create a hazard in our city. We can't live through something like that again, and I would be foolish not to take every step possible to make sure that we were mitigating against those harms or worse. We live in a very difficult world. We've been very fortunate in our city. We've seen what happens when those who want to do harm to our way of life attack our cities, attack our values. I want to make sure that we have every tool in our toolkit to guard against that, and encrypted radio transmissions is one of them. I'm not saying never get them. I'm saying a slight delay for purposes of officer and public safety.
Thanks, Mayor. Mariah, WBZ.
Hi, Mayor.
Hi there.
Today, Alderman Rodriguez, with the support of Congressman Jesus Chuy Garcia, introduced an ordinance that is meant to help people who've had high increases in property tax bills by creating a loan forgiveness program on home loans. They said that they'd use $10 million in unused, unallocated American Rescue Plan funds. What's your response to that proposal, and is it something you would support?
I haven't read it, so I can't speak to the specifics of that. But obviously, I know that people are concerned about their property tax bills, which are just coming into residences. And so we're going to look at what tools we have available at the municipal level to be able to give some kind of relief if possible. But candidly, $10 million is not going to get the job done. We've got to look at resources from the state and look at resources from the county as well, and come up with a proposal that addresses the issue. But I can't speak to the specifics because I've not seen it.
The cost of building the controversial new high school on Chicago's near south side has increased from $120 million to $150, $30 million more. Are you concerned about how CPS will find funding for the plan, given that state funding hasn't yet been secured? And Teresa Ma has said she wants the city to consider residents' concerns before pushing that funding forward?
Well, so first of all, I push back on the premise of your question, controversial. Not for the people of Chinatown, not for the people of the South Loop, and not for the people who are their legacy Ickes folks. All of those people, as you heard today, have universally said, this is a good plan, and we are comfortable with it, and we want to move forward. So I push back on the notion that it's controversial. It's controversial maybe to one or two people, but not for the folks who are in those areas that are actually going to benefit from this local high school. Look, the cost of construction everywhere has gone up. And that's something that we are dealing with across every single project that we're involved with as a city. But I'm confident that the resources will be there to make this high school a reality. It's critically important for a city. If you look at the areas of growth in our city, where this high school was served. We've got elementary schools down in the South Loop, for example, that are in 3 or 4 buildings because of the number of kids that are in those in the elementary school age. We need a high school, which is why I've supported it. You heard today from Alderwoman Lee about the fact that the kids of Chinatown are traveling 90 minutes or more one way to go to a high school, 100 different high schools that the kids of Chinatown are going to. Now, once this high school is up and operational, they'll be able to walk to school in their community. So this is a good thing for our city. It's a good thing to meet the needs of a growing area and population, and we will get it done.
Tessa, WBZ.
Hi there. Some aldermen, expressed concerns about Bally's economic outlook and said they wanted to see things to ensure the project is, on time and on cost. Is that something would you, support greater project management oversight from the city?
Well, you've asked 2 questions. First of all, the nonsense that was said today about Bally's not having the financial wherewithal to get the project done, it's just that. It's nonsense. We vetted this 20 ways from Sunday. We were very transparent with the alderman. Not surprisingly, that nonsense is being spewed by somebody who's a vocal opponent of the casino. Bally's has, and I'm going to ask the CFO, Jenny Bennett, to come up and speak to the particulars, but Bally's has secured right now today over $1.7 billion to build this casino right now. Right now. They have the money to get it done, which the aldermen know. Facts are not convenient to some, but that is the fact. The fact that they have a leaseback agreement is a good deal for them. A good deal for them, and the option to buy the property back down the road. So I don't have any concerns whatsoever about the financial wherewithal of Bally's. And of course, somebody suggested an owner's rep. We don't own we're not going to own the temporary, we don't own the permanent casino, but obviously we have a great interest in making sure that the project proceeds on time, on budget, and we will be very involved in making sure that we are monitoring what's happening. There are reporting structures that are in place. Jenny, do you want to speak to some of the other interesting things that were said by our colleagues in City Council?
Sure. Just to add to the mayor's comments, as a part of the HCA that we negotiated a guarantee from the full faith and credit of Bally's Corporation. They are the only company to provide us with that guarantee, and it doesn't really matter what your financial wherewithal is if the full finances of the company don't support the project itself. In addition to that, we also negotiated.
Explain what the full faith and credit guarantee.
And the full faith and credit guarantee essentially means that the finances and the obligations of the company support this project. It's essentially having money to back what you say you're going to do. In addition to that, the city also negotiated liquidated damages. So to the extent that Bally's doesn't fulfill on its obligations, then they would have to pay us for damages to the city of Chicago. And so regardless, we've got belts and suspenders to cover us for whatever it may be. No, regardless, as the mayor said, they do have the financing in place to cover the project, and we're not concerned about their financial wherewithal. As it relates to project management, we have currently 3 people who are dedicated to covering the project management for this project, and that's in addition to all of the people across many departments who help to support the project, including myself, Department of Transportation, Department of Planning and Development, Mayor's Office, Department of Law, Department of Finance, and there are a number of others as well.
Alice, Tribune? You have another question?
Yeah, the Bring Chicago Home Coalition, they're vowing to try again to get their proposal on the ballot, but in 2024. Meanwhile, in LA, we saw the new mayor issue an emergency declaration on the issue of homelessness. Is that a step you would, explore, or do you think more needs to be done to, add urgency to addressing the issue?
Are you asking, would I explore an emergency declaration? No. First of all, have you been to LA?
I'm from LA, yeah.
All right, so you've been there recently?
I go home regularly.
So then you know that Chicago and LA are on opposite sides of the spectrum when it comes to issues related to homelessness. I love LA, one of my favorite cities in the country. I'm big fan of Mayor, now, I guess I don't have to say Mayor-elect anymore, Mayor Karen Bass. We have formed a friendship and offered my support to her in any way possible, but we are nowhere near the same place. And look, in your reporting, make sure you say, we put in historic numbers of resources to support our homeless population, get people off the street, whether it's with more shelter space, whether it's with rapid rehousing, whether it's with low barrier shelters. We have done historic amounts of resources and other efforts to make sure that we're meeting the challenges of our homeless population. As you know, there's a lot of reasons why people end up on the street, and it's not purely financial. We unfortunately have folks on the street who are suffering from mental health challenges. We have people on the street who are suffering from substance abuse addiction, people on the street that have all of the above, financial, mental health, substance abuse. So our teams are working round the clock every single day, 7 days a week, to try to address the very unique needs of each of these folks, win their trust, and do everything we can to bring them into care. It's not an easy thing to do. You can't just simply snap your fingers and make it happen, but we're working our tails off. And we've added more full-time positions to make sure that we've got the resources that are necessary to do just that. So you can't look across the country and say, what about this, what about that? Of course, we look at best practices. Houston, frankly, I think, is a model that we look at favorably because I think they've done some pretty historic things, starting with Mayor Anise Parker and now continued through my friend Sylvester Turner's term. So we're talking with those folks on a regular basis. But negotiations require a compromise. negotiations require good faith and coming to the table, not with a set of demands that are where you're unwilling to compromise, but sitting down on the table and trying to move forward and see where you can reach that common ground. I started those conversations in 2019 with these folks, and they told me their way or no way.
Alice, Tribune.
Hi, Mayor.
Hi there.
For both the Red Line extension and the near South Side High School, is there any chance that they could fall through if the federal or state government doesn't pull through with funding? And if not, what makes you confident that the resources will definitely be there?
I feel very confident with respect to both projects that the resources will be there.
Could you elaborate on, have you been promised?
I feel confident because A, this is something that we are determined to make happen. B, both projects. B, obviously we've done our homework and reached out to the funding sources, and Red Line, obviously, the federal government is going to be critically important there. You may recall that I think it was Dorval in the summer of 21 when Secretary Buttigieg first came to Chicago in his role as secretary. We spent a lot of time with him talking about and showing him the plans for what the Red Line could do. I've had numerous conversations with him and his team since then, and I know President Carter, who worked in the federal government, has been talking to his former colleagues there to make sure that they understand the importance of it. This checks all the boxes of what the Biden administration has said that they want to do in these big mega projects to make sure that they're bringing equity to urban areas in particular and demonstrating that we have skin in the game. I feel very confident about it. And the same thing regarding the high school.
And I have a question for my colleague, A.D. Quigg. I understand the 2023 budget did not include a property tax hike, but the bills Chicagoans are responsible for paying in the coming weeks reflect a tax hike you did support, a burden shift from TIFs that you expanded today, and a higher levy at CPS, which had to take on additional costs last year. What is your message to Chicagoans who are looking for relief?
Well, I'm not sure I agree with all of those assumptions that were baked in. But look, this is a tough time for people. Inflation, I think, has hopefully stabilized and will start going down. We're going to look at the tools that we have, which frankly are limited at the municipal level. We don't set the property tax rates. We don't do the assessments, but we do speak with the counterparts in the county that do that. And as I said in answer to the other question, we're going to look at ways in which we can help mitigate against the effects of rising property assessments.
Mary Ann Ahern, NBC.
Mayor, hi. I wonder if you would react to this poll that was just out this week on the mayor's race. It does show that you have a steep climb. Can you share what you see as your path and what polling you've done that refutes this premise?
Well, here's what I would say. About 4 years ago this time.
You weren't the mayor then, Mayor.
Well, 4 years ago this time, if you let me finish.
But that you're comparing.
No. You asked me a question and I'm answering.
That's annoying.
Do you want me to answer?
Sure.
4 years ago this time, polling showed that I was about 1%. And, there were bigger names in, more money, and here I sit. Fast forwarding now, somebody took a poll for their preferred candidate. You all need to ask, did they simulate a real campaign? Did they run negatives against that? Well, as I understand it, they won't release the crosstabs and show what this was done. And I think there's some question about the methodology of that poll. Look, you're going to see and hear all sorts of stuff between now and February 28th. What I'm focused on is doing my job, making the case for why I deserve 4 more years as mayor. And I hope what you all do is anybody who says, I'm the front runner, I can beat the mayor, ask them, have they done the work to challenge with their negatives and simulated a campaign? And because I know what the answer to that is, and I feel very confident in my chances for re-election.
Could you also give us an insight into why it is very obvious you're not as available as you used to be taking questions? How is that turning on the light as you promised?
Well, I think I'm pretty available. I'm out and about. I'm out multiple times a week in neighborhoods doing interviews with reporters. I invite you all to come to the events that we have out in the neighborhoods.
Aaron, Daily Line.
Many of you don't show up.
Aaron, Daily Line.
Go ahead.
First question is for the new alderman. Hello. One thing that's been highlighted is you served as the Alderman George Cardenas's chief of staff for 3 years, and so you have experience working in his office. But how do you plan to differentiate yourself from him? How do you plan to be your own alderman?
Well, I mean, other than the obvious, in that I'm of a different generation. I'm Latina. I'm a woman. I am an attorney, so I definitely bring a much different perspective. He has more of a finance background, whereas, I went to law school. I have a legal background and training as a lawyer. And then, frankly, as a staffer, you get a much different perspective when you rise through the ranks and you go from, knocking on doors and fulfilling constituent requests to when you're the alderman. And so I would say that the sum of my experience makes me a completely different person.
Thank you. And for the mayor, today, Alderman Daniel Espada submitted a resolution nominating himself to be chair of the Environment Committee. This is the second time in recent months where an alderman has taken it upon themselves to, say they want to chair a committee. Why have these resolutions stalled, and do you support Alderman Espada as chair of the Environment Committee?
Well, first of all, you just filed it today, so saying resolutions, if you ask a question, I will do my best to answer it, but I can't answer it when I start to speak and you cut me off. So tell me if you want me to answer it or not. So there will be a process by which we evaluate that. In the first instance, we will have conversations with the vice chair, who's been there all along, as to whether or not she wants to step up to be the chair of the committee.
Thank you, Mayor. That's a wrap, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you. Happy holidays, everyone.